Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. The sun had recently sunken behind the horizon, and the night owls migrated to their favorite bars in a search for enjoyment. In a particular shinobi bar, 4 young adults were well into celebrating their recent promotions by indulging in one of the vices of shinobi and civilians alike, alcohol. They sat around a rugged wooden table trading smiles and laughs. Alcohol bottles littered the table, and all of the friends had a fresh bottle close by. They all wore the same standard green flak jacket, and each of them had a Konoha headband proudly displayed somewhere on their person. The jackets looked noticeably stiff on all 4 of them, and that was a characteristic that showcased their newness. The blonde man, who sat nearest to the window, had a small glass of potent liquid in his hand and close to his mouth. He also had many more of the small cups lined up within arm's reach. He looked at the wild-looking man straight across the table in the eyes. His blue eyes stared intently in the brown ones of his opponent. The feral man returned the look with one equally as intense and spoke up with a grin that exposed his prominent canines. "You ready to lose, Naruto?" Kiba said while swirling and inspecting the contents of his glass. They were about to commence a drinking game between the two. No one knew how it came to this point, but no one cared to stop their self-destructive fun. Not even Shikamaru, who usually would think that having 2 drunken idiots to deal with would be too troublesome. "I haven't lost a drinking game in my life, Kiba," Naruto replied smugly. It was true, but not because he could handle his drinks. "Naruto," Shikamaru interjected while lighting another cigarette, "this is your first time in a drinking game." Naruto took a side glance at Shikamaru then chuckled. "My statement still stands correct. Choji, on your call," Naruto said as he readied his glass even more than before. Kiba jolted to do so as well. Choji stood up straighter in his chair and lifted his heavy arm skyward. He looked at both competitors before resting his eyes in the middle of the table. Naruto's bravado did an excellent job of masking his nervousness. He did not have an extensive history with alcohol, and after telling the Kyuubi to sit this one out, he had no clue how his body would handle the amount of alcohol that he was going to down. He wondered if doing this would be worth it. He saw what alcohol did to people and did not like the idea of waking up in an unfamiliar place with no recollection of how he got there. He was not worried about one thing though. He was definitely going to beat Kiba. "And go," Choji said as he sent his arm down in an arc. It made a swiping sound as it cut the air on its way down. Naruto was immediately sent out of his worrying. Without hesitation, the 2 competitors threw their heads and glasses back. The alcohol burned on its way down their throats. In synchronization, their hands slammed the cups down onto the table with loud clinks. They both quickly grabbed another and continued to compete. Every other drink or so one would take a glance at the other, looking for a sign of them slowing down and breaking. Eventually, both slowed down until they grinded to a halt. Both competitors had their heads resting on the table in an attempt to settle their spinning world, exhausted from their activity. Their heads were facing their respective collections of empty glasses and counting them. 21, 22, 23. They counted in unison. Their voices got louder as the number got higher. 27. "Beat it, Blondie," Kiba yelled triumphantly. Naruto now had his chin resting on his palm and was looking at Kiba through an empty glass in his hand. He giggled at the strange effect the glass had on Kiba's image. He put it down before sliding it to Kiba and crossing his arms with a huge grin on his face. 28. He gloated. Kiba groaned and let his arms drop to his sides and head hit the table while he muttered swears under his breath. Naruto leaned back in his chair and had both arms up with his hands making victory signs. He almost fell backwards, but his knees caught the underside of the table and the chair was sent back down to rest on all 4 legs. He had a brief moment of panic, but he played off his mistake by asking Kiba for a reward. "Reward? Ya serious?" Kiba asked with an arched eyebrow. There was no reward discussed when they initially formed this game in their heads. "Yeah, way's it gone, B?" he slurred. You ain't gettin' jack shit, Kiba said while shaking his head. Naruto was disappointed. Wah, no puppy, no money, no girl, Naruto asked in a childish and mischievous way. He was just prodding the man for a reaction. Kiba snorted and shook his head with more vigor. As if you would get a girl for a reward, much less get one in general. He joked while checking inside his vest pouches, before pulling out a watch and grimacing. The dig at his courting game bugged Naruto for an indescribable reason, and he responded with confidence. Yeah, bet I could get a girl in here, he said while making wide swinging gestures with his arms. It was a bold claim for two reasons. Reason one was that he had never had a girlfriend before, and reason two being that everyone in attendance was a battle-hardened shinobi that was not going to be put in awe by his profession like civilians were known to be. Doubt you could, but I gotta get going. Promised I'd be back earlier than now, Kiba said as he got up from his chair and stumbled to the door. Naruto put his head down again and stared at the many glasses that he had. Shikamaru and Choji both looked at each other before they both nodded and stood up from their seats. They both decided that they had enough celebration. Hey Naruto, are you gonna stay here for a bit longer? Me and Shika have had enough, Choji said while jerking his thumb to Shikamaru. His reply was a weak thumbs up from the blonde man. Shikamaru put a hand on Choji's shoulder and spoke up. I'm betting that he'll be fully sober before the sun's up, he said reassuringly while pushing the door open with his back. He gave one last look at Naruto before shaking his head in amusement and exiting with his friend. Naruto's head was still on the table as he played with the empty glasses from his battle. He thought about what Kiba said as he built the glasses up into a pyramid. Was Kiba talkin' 'bout sayin' I can't get a girl? He whispered while knocking down the pyramid and regretfully listening to the loud and numerous clinks of the glasses hitting the table and each other. The noise was enough for him to sit up straight and look embarrassedly around the building to see if anyone was glaring at him for his disruption. His eyes came upon the back of a shapely feminine form that was sitting alone at a bar stool. He studied her as Kiba's words came back to him, and with a defiant smile he made up his mind to prove him wrong. He stood up from his chair and instantly felt like he was walking on a water bed. It took him a few discombobulated seconds before he felt confident enough to move. I'm gonna show him, he thought as he wobbled his way over to the bar and made sure to seem as sober as he could when he got near. The worry of what could go wrong entered his mind but was quickly ran out by the liquid courage that was in his system. He sat down on the stool next to her and tried his best to act indifferent to her. He studied her but could not see much as her head was slightly down and her silky, long, black hair covered her face from view. He did however notice the growing collection of glasses that were by her side and figured that she could not have been much better off than him. All right, now what do I say? He thought, but his mouth already decided. Hey, what brings you here? He said and instantly slapped himself mentally. What a lame line, he thought. He paled when her head slowly came up and turned to him. The lights at the front of the bar were much brighter than the ones that lit his table, and her stunning face made his eyes squint even more. She had beautifully dark eyes and pale skin, and Naruto could have sworn that he knew her. His drunkenness, however, prevented him from putting a name on her beautiful face. Her mouth moved and Naruto was brought to focus on her lips. She moved them again and Naruto realized that she was talking. Hey, she said. What was it you said? Naruto thought she had an incredibly sweet voice, and answered with a face that was tinted red by not only alcohol. What brings you here? He stammered. She smiled at him for an unknown reason and answered. I had a hard day today. What about you? She said in an incredibly friendly way. Did she know him? What about me? Was his intelligent reply. She giggled at his goofiness and answered again. What brings you here? Now Naruto never considered himself a master of conversation, but not even he was prepared for the absolute pinnacle of human interaction that he was about to grace this beautiful woman with. My legs. He blurted out as he pointed at his legs, and to have even more effect he raised them a little. How else would he get there, or anywhere? Immediately after that, he felt his soul leave his body. He cursed alcohol and the Kyuubi for listening to him. He looked at the woman in horror as her previous tipsy giggle became full-on laughing. She was loud enough to draw the attention of many of the other patrons. Naruto was the only one of the two to be aware of this, and he tried to calm her down by changing the subject. Why, you said you had a rough time today, right? What's that all about? She quickly stopped laughing and her voice lost most of its jovial tone. I've actually been lonely for a while, so I came here to have a few drinks, she said before she took a look at the collection she had off to her side. Well, more than a few. Naruto's eyes quickly noticed the sadness in her eyes, and his compassion reached out for her. Do you want to talk about it? Naruto asked, and the woman seemed surprised. You wouldn't want to listen to a woman vent, would you? She asked carefully, as if asking would turn him away. I've got all night, he said, and saw her eyes fill with what he believed to be gratitude. She knocked on the table and put up 2 fingers. Her voice returned to the pleasant joyfulness that Naruto was glad to hear. Bartender, 2 more drinks please, she said happily as the burly man nodded. He slid 2 glasses their way and Naruto was of half the mind to decline the drink. He was not confident in his ability to stomach another drink, but he did want to offer his help and time to her. He stopped the sliding glass with his hand and looked at the woman for an answer. Her eyes were attentively looking into his own, and she had her drink extended towards him in a toast. He smiled and clanked his glass against hers, and they both drank together. The early morning sunlight found its way through a crack in the window's blinds and assaulted Naruto's closed eyes with pinpoint accuracy. The bright light warmed his sleeping face and caused his eyes and nose to crinkle in an attempt to stop the brightness from disturbing him. It did not work though, and Naruto woke up without a sound. Without opening his eyes, he turned his head away and tried to fall back asleep. An itch on his nose made itself known and demanded his attention, so Naruto raised his arm to scratch at it. Or he would have, if his arm was not stopped by something covered in hair. This immediately removed all the grogginess Naruto had from sleep, and he was now wired awake, and his pulse was racing. His eyes remained closed, but his other senses were going off the charts. He could feel that the bed was definitely bigger and softer than his own. He also felt the warmness of someone else's skin intimately touching his own. He heard the consistent breathing of someone right next to him. He knew his arm was under this person's head, and they were using it as a pillow. After piecing the evidence together, Naruto knew exactly the situation he was in. He was in a bed with another person, who was equally as. He was also in a place he didn't know, with no recollection of how he got there. Great. The entire premise seemed like a scene straight out of one of Jiraiya's books, but Naruto found no amusement in his situation. He could only go without opening his eyes for so long, so he decided to fully take in his surroundings. He counted down in anticipation. 3, 2, please don't be a dude, and 1. He opened his eyes wide, and upon seeing the stranger's face he instantly remembered his time at the bar. Her face was even more beautiful than it was when he first saw it, and he took a few moments to take it in. He noticed new features that he hadn't before because of his intoxication, like how she was certainly older than him. Her age did not detract from her beauty though, it just made her look more regal. Her head was tranquilly resting on his arm, and her black hair was messily snaking out in many directions. She had a look of deep comfort on her face, and Naruto found himself feeling relaxed. A smile found its way onto Naruto's face, and his worry when he first woke up was replaced with acceptance. He had never been in this situation before, but he soon found himself enjoying it. Her right leg and arm were both resting on his body, and Naruto had never felt so comfortable before. That comfortableness was quickly dashed out when he heard a string of knocks on the door. His breath hitched and he stared at the door in intense silence before a muffled voice was heard. I'm back from my mission, Mom. Naruto was sure it was a male voice, and he was stunned when he heard him call her Mom. Naruto was okay with waking up in a single woman's bed, but waking up with someone's mom stretched across his body was a difficult situation that he did not want to be caught in. He knew that walking out and leaving was no longer an option, and that he had to cut his time with the sleeping beauty short. With delicate care he lifted her limbs off from his body and meticulously pulled his arm out from under her head. He supported her head to prevent the sudden change from waking her. He tried his best to do all this without glancing below her face, and by the end of it, he covered her body all the way up to her neck with the soft white blanket. He did every action as silently as he could, and he thanked the alcohol in her system for keeping her sedated. After he wormed his body away from her and off the bed, he felt cold. His arm that was under her head began to tingle as blood began to flow back into it, and he swung it around to speed up the process. He studied the room around him as he did this, and was taken aback by the numerous articles of clothing that were haphazardly thrown around the room. He began collecting his own clothes to cover himself and her clothes to stack neatly by the foot of the bed. His black shirt was the first thing he put on, and he kept searching for his boxers. He found his khaki cargo pants, his headband, his boots, and his vest all before he could find his boxers. He was sure he had worn them yesterday, but they were nowhere to be found. That was until he looked higher than the floor, and his brows raised in incredulous surprise when he saw them spinning above, draped over one of the blades of the ceiling fan fastened above the bed. He stared at them slowly spin in confusion and mild amazement. Wild. He slowly got back on the bed and stood up on it to reach the fan. He grabbed his boxers and deftly hopped off the bed before putting them on. He was halfway done sliding his pants up before he heard another knock on the door. The knock startled him and he tripped over one of his pant legs. His fall resulted in a loud bang that he was sure alerted everyone in the house. He quickly recovered from his fall and was relieved to see her still asleep. He then turned his head to the door while fumbling with the pants. "Mom, are you all right?" The voice on the outside of the door sounded worried. "I'm coming in." Naruto watched in horror as the doorknob turned, and he decided that now was as good a time as ever to leave. He focused in his mind with closed eyes, and found himself in his own house milliseconds before the door opened. He wiped his brow in relief, and thanked the power of seals. Who knows what would have happened if someone walked in to see him in their mother's bedroom. He finished putting his pants on before he fell back onto his couch and looked up to his ceiling while letting out a relieved sigh. When his pulse finally settled down, he decided to get on with his day. He began cooking some breakfast, seeing that it was still early in the morning. He opened the fridge and pulled out a carton of eggs along with a gallon of milk. He set them down on the counter and started the stove burner, all the while whistling an upbeat, nameless song. When the eggs were done cooking, he put them on a piece of toast and poured out a tall glass of milk. He carried both cup and plate over to the small island and sat down on a stool. He ate the food in a comfortable silence, and then he sat on his couch while practicing his calligraphy. He had the whole day off thanks to his promotion, so he decided that he needed to occupy his time with something. He practiced for a sizable amount of time before he heard a swift knock on his door. He got up from his couch and strolled over to the door and opened it. A former team member was at the door. Naruto smiled. "Good morning, Sasuke," he said happily. Sasuke was immediately unnerved by the joy in Naruto's face and voice, and he replied to the blonde in a tone not nearly as happy. "Morning," he said, and Naruto simply nodded. "What brings you here to my home?" "I came back from a mission earlier this morning and wanted to congratulate you for your promotion," he explained. "Well, thanks. Congratulations on your promotion too. It's a shame you were out of the village and couldn't celebrate it with me and the guys." "It was fun," Naruto said. Sasuke nodded in agreement before speaking. "That's also a reason why I came here. My mother and I are going to celebrate my promotion at home, and I wanted to invite you to come over. As an apology for missing your celebration." He said each sentence faster and quieter than the previous, as if saying them would hurt his reputation. "I'd love to. Naruto gave a thumbs up and grinned in a way that reminded Sasuke of a duo of green-clad maniacs. He shuddered at the thought. The happiness that the blonde man was exerting was beginning to scare him. What has you so happy, Naruto? He asked. Did you win the lottery? You could say that, Naruto said with a hand scratching his head. Well, that's not really an answer. Sasuke mumbled but didn't press the issue. Anyway, I need to pick up some stuff for the celebration. Can you help get some things, so we can get them all faster? We are planning to have it around too. Sure. Just give me a list. Naruto said, and Sasuke quickly wrote down things for Naruto to get. Sasuke then left Naruto's apartment and the blonde was soon to follow. He locked the door behind him and made his way to the market. He read the list in his hand and held a mental conversation with himself to think about where he could find the items. His thinking drifted to the unexpected but welcomed invitation Sasuke gave him. He had never been invited to his house before, or met his mother, so he was excited to see what it was like in the almost abandoned Uchiha district. He wandered around the market, buying things on the list when he found himself in front of a butcher. Beef was on the list, so he entered the store and gazed at the various meats that hung around him. He walked to the counter and ordered what he needed. The butcher bagged the meat and handed it to the blonde while wishing him a good day. Naruto turned around and made his way back to the entrance when he spotted a familiar face staring at the multiple cuts displayed on the hooks. Whatcha doing here, Kiba? He asked. Kiba turned to him in surprise, but he smiled after seeing who it was. Nothing much. What are you gonna buy? Nothing. Just window shopping. This confused Naruto. Who window shops for meat? This got a reaction out of Kiba. I do. Why? Naruto asked, and Kiba was getting slightly annoyed. Because I enjoy meats. Like this one. He picked up a large chunk from a display. This is from a giant bear that was killed in the Forest of Death during this year's Chunin exam. Just look at this marbling. He said while practically drooling. Naruto gave him a look that conveyed concern, and Kiba did not like how this conversation was going. So, what are you doing here? He asked to change the subject, and it worked. I am picking up some stuff for Sasuke's promotion celebration, he said as he began to walk. Kiba followed him leisurely. Really? Kiba asked, surprised. He doesn't seem like the kind to do celebrations. He isn't really. Naruto realized before a thought crossed his mind. I think his mom is putting him up to it. Yeah, that seems more likely than anything, but then again I don't know his mom. She's more reclusive than him, if that's possible. So, where are you going next? Kiba said as they finally exited the butcher. Naruto took a look at the list that he produced from his pocket and read from it quietly before stuffing it back in. Do you know where I could get some vegetables? Kiba scoffed at the mention of greens, but he decided to offer his help. Yeah, there's a produce stand not far down from here. I'll show ya, he said while pointing down the road. Thanks, Naruto said. He and Kiba started walking down the busy street, making sure not to bump into any of the other market goers. Now that they were out of the butcher, Kiba was able to smell scents other than meat, and he picked up a rather strong odor coming from the man he was bringing to the vegetable stand. It got strong enough to the point that Kiba could no longer stand ignoring it. So, who's the lucky girl? He asked awkwardly but with confidence. Naruto stiffened and gave Kiba a confused look. What do you mean? You met a girl last night. I did, Naruto said slowly. And you? And I what? Naruto said, genuinely confused. The confusion made Kiba impatient. You had with her, he declared. Naruto raised an eyebrow before agreeing with him. I guess. It did make sense to him. After all, he did wake up entangled with a beauty. Surprisingly, Naruto was not freaking out over the revelation. You mean, I guess. You reek of it, man. Naruto didn't dare to deny Kiba's smelling prowess, but he did smell his shirt sleeve for a scent he could faintly detect. Well, I had my suspicions, he said while putting a finger on his chin. I just couldn't be sure. Kiba's mouth was wide open while looking at the man with disbelief. How could you not know if you had with someone? He said loudly while flailing his arms around. Naruto, being especially conscious of how others act around him, noticed the crowd of listeners that Kiba was generating from his outburst and decided to end the conversation. Are we almost there yet? He said in an unnaturally stern way. Kiba straightened up and dropped the conversation. Yeah, it's this one over here, he said as he approached a stand with green produce all around. Excuse me, do you have any cabbages? Naruto asked politely. I do. How many do you want? Just one will be fine, thank you. He replied while digging into his pocket and grabbing his wallet. The clerk handed him the cabbage while he gave the man the proper amount of money. He thanked the man again before he left for Sasuke's house with Kiba not far behind. So, Naruto, what's her name? Kiba questioned. Naruto turned and faced him. I didn't ever get it. He replied slowly. You had with her and didn't even get her name. You dog. I never asked for a name, neither did she. Naruto said defensively. Not even in the morning, when things died down. Naruto gave an awkward chuckle. Well, I didn't stay long. I had to get the hell out of Dodge when her son came knocking on her door. The gate to the Uchiha complex was a sight to behold. The object itself was composed of black metal bars spaced apart to create doors, but the arch that topped the gate was made of expertly carved marble that now shows its lack of maintenance. In the center of the marble, at the highest point of the gate, the Uchiha clan symbol was proudly displayed. Naruto was sure the gate was a source of pride for the clan when they were still around, but when he looked at it, all he saw was how it had been taken over by vines and grime. The decrepit gate creeped the blonde out a bit, but that was not going to stop him from celebrating with his friend. He pushed the large gate open and kept walking, with his bag of groceries in his hand. Naruto had never been in the compound before, but was not afraid of getting lost. From the directions Sasuke gave him earlier that day, his friend's house should be on the main path through the complex. It also should stick out like a sore thumb, because it was the only house that was still being cared for. All the other houses were dirtied by years of neglect, none of them had been touched since the massacre. They gave off a very ominous and bleak mood, and Naruto was thankful that he found their house before the structures filled him with dread. The house was slightly bigger than the others, being that the clan head's family lived there. It also was well kept, with flowers and other plants littering the lawn. Naruto looked at the greenery after he knocked on the front door. He always had an interest in gardening, but never had the time or space for it. The hobby was probably too trivial for Sasuke to have an interest in it, so Naruto assumed that his mother was the one responsible for the appealing scenery. The door opened not too long after he knocked, and he was greeted by the male Uchiha. He was wearing casual clothing, something that Naruto almost never saw the man in. Naruto himself was wearing clothes just as casual. He had on a burnt orange t-shirt and blue jeans. Glad you could make it. Thought you got lost for a second, Sasuke said with a smirk while opening the door wider for entry. Naruto humped and took his shoes off near the other ones. He looked at Sasuke and lifted the bag in his hands with a questioning look. Sasuke nodded before tilting his head to sign for Naruto to follow him. The entryway came into an open living room, and Sasuke led him farther to the kitchen, which was separated by a partial wall. Naruto looked around, impressed by the spacious size of the house. The living room was easily the size of his apartment, and the L-shaped couch looked awfully inviting. His observation switched to the kitchen when Sasuke led him past the half wall. There were appliances in pristine condition, and white granite countertops covered every cabinet that rested on the floor. He was tempted to run his fingers over the smooth stone. He walked over to the large dining table and set his groceries down next to the ones Sasuke bought. Sasuke took his own purchases out from his bag and Naruto copied him. They threw away the plastic bags, and Sasuke grabbed multiple vegetables and began cutting them. Naruto offered his help, but they only had a single cutting board, so he sat down at the dining table. The house was quiet, with only Sasuke's kitchen knife making noise as it hit the wooden cutting board. Sasuke finished cutting a tomato and opened his free hand to gesture for another thing to chop. Naruto picked up a bell pepper that was on the table and tossed it to the black-haired man. So, is your mother out right now? Naruto asked in an attempt to get some noise into the room. Sasuke began chopping the new vegetable as he replied. No, she was very tired this morning, so she stayed in bed longer than she usually does. Rough night, huh? Naruto said absent-mindedly. He was leaning back and forth with the kitchen chair. Yeah, she slept off her tiredness and woke up around 11. She went to take a shower just recently. She should be done any time now and be able to help me make lunch, Sasuke explained. Yeah, what are we making anyway? My favorite, he said with a smile not often found on his face. And that is, you'll see soon enough, he replied while sliding all the chopped pieces off the board and into a pot. A surprise, Naruto noted. I am intrigued. I think you'll like it, along with dessert. Can I know what that is? The blonde asked. His response was a shake of the head. You're killing me with all this suspense. Good. Sasuke replied and got back to preparing their food. His hearing picked up the sound of a doorknob turning, and he stopped cutting to look down the hallway. Naruto still sat at the dining table, but his attention was also on the hallway. He wanted to see what Sasuke's mother looked like. When she finally came completely into view, Naruto choked on his own spit, and it was only partially because of her beauty. Good afternoon, boys. I hope I didn't keep you too long, she said in the sweetest way possible. Her hair was up in a high ponytail and her face radiated happiness, and Naruto knew exactly who this was. How could he forget? He just saw her in the morning. Good afternoon, Mom, Sasuke said and she nodded at him. Gee, good afternoon, Mrs. Uchiha. Naruto stammered. The female Uchiha turned her head to look at Naruto, and his pulse raced. Naruto noticed that her face did not show any signs of recognition, but she still gave him a warm smile and nod. Please, call me Mikoto. And you are. She addressed him casually, but not with familiarity. Naruto picked up on this and two scenarios came into his mind. She either forgot the entirety of their night together, or she was pretending that she never met him before. Naruto hoped that she was clueless as to what happened between them. Naruto. Nice to finally meet you, Mikoto, he said nonchalantly with an extended hand. She took it and shook it. Naruto's pulse was steadily declining to a normal rate as he began to come to terms with the revelation. Ah, Naruto. Sasuke tells me about you more than any other person. Nice to meet you, too. Naruto wasn't sure how he should react to the comment. Did Sasuke speak of him with admiration or annoyance? Also, did he have any other friends to speak about? The questions ran through the Uzumaki's mind while his eyes wandered over to his former teammate. The Uchiha had an annoyed look while shaking his head, making it seem like he was embarrassed by his mother's words. He looked back at the source of the embarrassment, and a thought that previously did not strike home hit Naruto with the force of 1,000 Rasengans. I had with my best friend's mom. He thought with wide eyes. The room felt like it had dropped a few degrees in temperature. Sasuke noticed the look on Naruto's face and became concerned. What's with the face, Naruto? He asked. I'm fine, he replied while raising his arms with open palms in dismissal. He needed to get the attention off of himself. Let's get back to cooking. He offered and smacked his open palm with his fist. Yes, the woman said while clamping her hands together. I think I can take over the main operation now, but you boys can still help. She said while flipping the cutting board over and slapping the slabs of beef onto it. Will do. HN. The trio worked well together to make their celebratory meal. As they prepared the food, they exchanged small talk and a couple laughs. During this time Naruto was still worried about if Mikoto actually did remember him, but by the end of it he was convinced she did not because of how naturally she acted. When the meal was finished cooking, the three ate at the dining table before moving over to the living room to have some alcohol. All three of them comfortably sat on the couch, stretched out in lounging positions. This time they drank. Naruto did not make the mistake of giving Kurama time off. They drank enough to last them well into the evening, where Naruto decided to say his farewells. He really enjoyed his time in their company, but all good things have to end. Well, thank you for having me, but I've got to get going, he said as he sat up from the soft couch cushion. On his way to the exit, a loud boom of thunder rattled the house. He opened the front door slightly to check the weather, and rain practically falling sideways soaked the rug at the entrance to the house. He quickly tried to close it, and could feel the strong wind fight his efforts by blowing against the door. When he won the fight, he turned back to the two Uchiha. He looked at the two family members with a look of bewilderment. Man, it's really pouring out there. Naruto deadpanned with his thumb stabbing towards the door. Yeah, it'd to walk in it, Sasuke said without a care. Why don't you stay here for the night? The storm is supposed to last until early morning, the mother offered. Naruto was thankful for the offer but tried to decline it. Oh, I can't take any more of your time. I'll be fine, really. I can use seals too. Mikoto wasn't hearing it and interrupted him. Nonsense, we both have loved your company, and we have plenty of room. We'd love for you to stay the night. Right, son, she said while looking at the other Uchiha. I think he'll be fine in the rain. Idiots don't catch colds anyf. He stopped as a hand came and smacked the back of his head. We have a guest bedroom. Naruto smiled at the display and weighed the woman's offer in his mind. In reality, Naruto could simply teleport back to his house, like he had done that morning, but after witnessing Mikoto's adamancy for his staying, he did not think he had an actual choice in the matter. Well, if I'm not intruding, I think I'm inclined to take you up on the offer, he said. The mother in Mikoto was not going to let him step foot into the inclement weather, he figured. How convenient. Sasuke, could you show him the guest bedroom, please? She said while picking up the glasses in the living room and putting them in the sink. Sure thing, he said while signaling for Naruto to follow him. They went further into the house where Sasuke pointed to a door on the right. That's the bathroom, he explained and switched arms to point at the door on the left. That's the guest room, thanks, Naruto said. Sasuke walked to the door to his room before turning back to Naruto. You're welcome. I would show you how the shower works, but I have a mission waiting for me tomorrow morning. I know how a shower works, head. Oh, you've been in one before, he teased. You better get your beauty rest for your mission. Night, the Uchiha said before disappearing behind his bedroom door. Night, he said to no one as he opened the door to his room for the night. When he walked in, he took note of how the room was oriented. To a far corner of the room was a single twin-sized bed, with a wooden nightstand within arm's reach. On it was a clock and a lamp. In the right corner closest to him there was an empty desk. There was a closet along one of the walls, but he did not bother opening it. He had no use for it. All in all, the room was bare but comfortable, and it was different to Naruto's cramped, busy apartment. He would not have a problem sleeping in it though. He could sleep on a bed of nails if it was the only bed around. Thankfully, the bed on offer was one arguably softer than his own, and when he lay down on it, he drifted into sleep without hassle. He did not stay asleep the whole night though, as he was prodded into consciousness by the need to drink. His throat was dry and a glass of water sounded incredibly refreshing to him. He shimmied off from the bed and walked over to the door, where he turned the knob slowly as to not make any noise. He walked just as slow for the same reason, and when he got to the kitchen he made sure to open and close cabinets without making a sound. He was not familiar enough with the house to know where everything was stored, so he had trouble finding the glasses. He did eventually, and made sure to lift a stacked glass straight up in order to prevent it from clanging against any other glass. The loudest part of the whole operation was turning on the faucet, but Naruto was not concerned that it was loud enough to wake the other two. He brought the end of the faucet handle up, and he watched the water fall down into his waiting cup. This faucet was not as loud as the one back home, something that he was grateful for. He sent the faucet handle back down and put the cup up to his mouth. The water was as refreshing as he thought it would be, and he wiped his face before sighing contently. He wasn't sure where to put the cup, so he lowered it into the sink and again made sure it didn't clash with any glasses. He was proud of himself for being so quiet, but the pride was quickly replaced with fear when the lights unexpectedly flashed on. He was blinded in the center of the kitchen and felt like a caught criminal. He squinted through his taut eyes and saw Mikoto in a nightgown. She had one hand leaning on the kitchen wall and another resting on her hip. Mikoto, sorry if I woke you up. I tried to be as quiet as I could. He felt bad. It's all right, Naruto. I was already awake, she said. Naruto thought that her voice didn't carry the same tone that it did during the day, and he was slightly nervous because of it. Maybe she was mad that he was digging through their stuff. He gulped. Oh, so I didn't wake you. That's good to hear. I tried my best to be quiet when I came out here to get some water, he said, trying to explain himself. What brings you here? The woman sauntered slowly towards Naruto, and when she was just feet away, she pointed down to her knees. Naruto dumbly followed her hands and found himself staring at her long, creamy legs. He was confused for a moment, but then two quiet words cut through the then silent room. My legs, Mikoto whispered while giving a devious smile. Naruto had a sharp intake of breath when he heard those two soft-spoken words. Mikoto leaned towards the boy before stopping mere inches away from his face. She looked into his eyes in a way that made Naruto feel like a cornered mouse. Why you? Remember? He asked in horror. This was a new situation, one that would likely end in his death if his experiences with Sakura were anything to go off of. She put her finger under his chin. Hard to forget such powerful words. She joked and Naruto blushed. He looked at the tile floor in embarrassment, hoping that averting his eyes would make the situation go away. He could still see her feet, and he knew that his action was futile. He sharply looked back up and faced the smirking woman before speaking. The night before, it shouldn't have happened. Naruto saw Mikoto's expression immediately change and she became saddened by his words. Her confident smile sagged until it became a quivering lip. She hung her head and played with her fingers while speaking to him. Clearly his words were not what she had expected him to say, and she searched her surroundings before speaking in a defeated voice. I know it shouldn't have. I was drunk off my and so were you. I was in trouble, and you came and offered your help. I was so alone, and when you came over and acted like you cared about me, I couldn't let you leave, so I made sure to keep us drunk. I used you to feel like I had someone. She looked away dejectedly, and Naruto tried to take some pressure off of her. He felt just as guilty. Please don't feel like you used me. I came over there on my own will, and I also stayed there on it. The alcohol may have been affecting me, but don't think for a moment that you forced me into anything. I'm just as guilty. In fact, I'm worse than you. All you wanted was someone to talk to. I did it because of something stupid. His words did not seem to have much effect in changing the woman's deteriorating mood. It's all I've wanted. She started to cry. Naruto stiffened from the uncomfortableness in the room. He was not used to emotions like this. He stared with wide eyes as she vented. My husband is gone, my friends are all gone, and Sasuke has been going on missions 24/7, so I rarely see him. I'm always alone in this huge house, and it gets so unbearable. Naruto hesitantly put a hand on her shoulder in an attempt to comfort her. He was not sure what to do. Comforting crying women was not his forte. I can see how I was helpful, he said and immediately wanted to hit himself. What kind of sentence was that? He really was out of his element with this one. Where was the bad guy to explode with jutsu? You were more than helpful. That whole night I was ecstatic that there was someone who I could be with, who I could spend time with. It didn't matter what happened, as long as I wasn't alone anymore. But when I woke up and saw you weren't there, I crashed back down. I had to see you again, so I made Sasuke invite you to our celebration. Also, I could get alone with you and tell you how wonderful it was to be with you last night, and to ask you. She trailed off. Ask me what? Naruto asked. If there was anything he could do to help, he was eager to do it. Mikoto turned her head to face away from Naruto, and her eyes stared through the living room window. She could not see anything through it, just darkness, but it prevented her from having to face the blonde man. His reflection was just as hard to look at. She paused for a short while, before mustering up the courage and facing Naruto. If you could continue to spend time with me. She saw the look of bewilderment on Naruto's face and scrambled to clear things up. It doesn't have to be UAL. It just has. I just can't be alone anymore. She said with a flushed face. The emotions conveyed by her words and face filled Naruto with empathy, and he found himself wanting to help the woman like he did the night before. I can't refuse helping someone who needs it. I'd be glad to give you company. He said and was immediately hugged by the woman. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. She exclaimed. Joy and gratitude filled her heart, and a beaming smile filled her face. Naruto was being crushed by the woman's hug. It was a different yet comforting feeling. His chest was warmer than usual. Unlike the last time Naruto woke up with a woman, he was not panicked. Long black strands of hair tickled his nose with each inhale, and a warm cheek on his right pectoral weighed down his chest in a comforting way. He took his free hand and ran his fingers through his own hair, and looked towards the single window in his room that was doing a fair job at keeping the sunlight out. He could hear the soft murmurs of chirping birds as they began their daily conversations. The entire atmosphere was so serene, making this morning one of the most tranquil he had ever woken up to. It also helped that this time he actually knew where he was and how he got there. He did not have to worry about being murdered either. Not that it was a possibility the first time, but who knows? I could get used to this, he whispered to himself. It was the second time he had another person to wake up with, and it felt nice. Surprisingly, the man did not feel awkward with there being a beautiful woman lying peacefully on him. His inexperience with women led him to believe the opposite would have been true. I already am, Mikoto replied, startling Naruto. She stretched out her arms upward and arched he back while releasing a healthy yawn. Her yawning also made Naruto do the same. He put a fist up to his face to cover his wide-open mouth. Hey, morning, he replied with an eye smile. Morning. She tilted her head up towards him and looked him in the eyes with a contagious smile. Naruto was obligated to return one. Her eyes told him how much she appreciated his actions. Sleep well. Best I have in years. I'm glad, he said genuinely. Helping people always made him feel amazing. This was no different, and his heart was saturated with an indescribable feeling. He took a look at the clock at their side and noticed the time. Naruto's mouth morphed into a lopsided grimace. Mikoto, seeing his expression, also looked at the clock and gave a pout. Do you have somewhere to be today? That must have been what brought down his mood. Yeah, he said as he sat up, making Mikoto also sit up. My time off from promotion ended last night. Got a report in soon. That's too bad. I was hoping on staying in for a while. She had the soft bedsheets wrapped around her form with a look of content stretched across her face. I wouldn't mind laying around either, but I don't want to lose the promotion I just got. I'll go make us some tea. Mikoto slid off the bed and brought all of the bedsheets off with her. They slid away from Naruto and with them their warmth. Feeling the air cool his now exposed legs made Naruto realize that he was still in the clothes he went to bed in. Those being just his boxers. Looking down at his underwear, he understood that he had been wearing them alone since he had went to sleep the first time the night before. He quickly covered himself with a pillow, drawing the attention of the woman. She raised a single eyebrow, and he began to explain himself. I don't want to be disrespectful in the presence of a woman, he said and scratched his cheek. Mikoto gave a smirk. Your current attire didn't seem to affect your actions in the kitchen last night. Blue eyes widened in realization. Naruto was not self-conscious in most situations, but his cheeks warmed up. He did not remember having a single thought of being just in his boxers during their entire conversation the previous night. His mind was probably occupied with freaking out over the revelation that Mikoto remembered their first night together. Nothing to be embarrassed about either. It's nothing I haven't seen before. The way she said it made his cheeks get even hotter. He was sure that he was glowing. The woman watched the blushing man fidget before giving the doorknob a twist. She was about to exit into the hallway before Naruto spoke up. What about Sasuke? Naruto asked, concerned about what his friend would do after seeing the well-rested mother leaving his room. Mikoto's hand that was on the doorknob limply fell to her side. She gave a side glance back to the blonde in the guest bed. He left hours ago, like he always does. The boy leaves before the sun's even up, she said sadly with a faraway gaze. Naruto's brows lifted in slight surprise. He knew that Sasuke was always going on missions, but this level of dedication was something else. He decided then and there to try and convince Sasuke to spend more time with his mother. He did not have to be the only one helping his new friend with her loneliness. Mikoto opened the door fully, and she walked out and toward the kitchen. Naruto was soon to follow, after quickly sliding on his clothes. The woman was going through cupboards when he reached the kitchen and offered the blonde a seat at the dinner table. He sat down and watched the woman as she started to prepare tea. She put a kettle on the gas stove, and with a quick hand sign and a breath, a fire was lit underneath the container. "Do you drink tea?" she asked as she leaned against the countertop and watched the kettle. It would take a short while before it was ready, so she decided that conversation would pass the time. "I don't usually, but I'd love some today," he said, trying to be polite. He was not a heavy drinker of tea, or any hot drink for that matter, but he wanted to be as kind as he could. It was not like he needed any uppers anyway, with the furball in his stomach constantly energizing him. After a short wait, the kettle screamed that it was warm enough. Mikoto then set down 2 cups at the table and filled them both up with the steaming liquid. Naruto gave his thanks and they drank together. "So, now that you're promoted, you'll be getting a lot of missions, huh?" The mug she gripped was warming her hand. Naruto took a sip from his own. "Yeah, I'm not sure how often I'll get one, but the workload's gotta be pretty big. I could be out of the village more often than I've ever been," he answered. He saw her head dip slightly, and realized that what he said was not what she wanted to hear. "But don't worry, I'll make sure to spend as much time with you as you want." "Thank you, Naruto. But I know that you won't always be able to hang out with me. I think I'll be able to handle the loneliness if I know you'll be coming back." Naruto gave a reassuring smile, stood up, and offered his hand to Mikoto. He was stretched over the table as he confidently stared into her eyes. "Mikoto, I promise that whenever you feel lonely, I'll come and spend some time with you. And I don't go back on my promises." The woman looked up at the man in awe, before taking his hand with her own and shaking it. "Thank you," she said gratefully. Naruto gave a bright smile with a thumbs up. "It's my pleasure. Thank you for the tea, Mikoto. I would love to spend more time with you, but duty calls. I'll make sure to stop by when I can," he said gleefully. "See you till then," she said with equal enthusiasm. Naruto was led to the front door and gave one last farewell before exiting the Uchiha household. He raised a hand up in the air as to wave to his host. Mikoto watched as the boy walked and then ran out of her compound. "That man is really something else," she said whimsically with her body leaned against the door jamb. Naruto jumped through Konoha at a slow pace compared to how he usually sped through the village. He was still traveling at a speed that no civilian could match, but he could have easily been passed by any ninja with training. He was going this speed for no reason but to enjoy it. He had woken up in an exceptionally good mood, and he was too busy enjoying the world to care about speed. Helping Mikoto must have made him feel incredibly good. When he got closer to the Hokage tower, he fell down onto the road and began to walk towards it. His happiness was spread to those that he greeted all the way to the tower. He entered the tower and gave a good morning to the receptionist, who gave one in return. He made his way to the Hokage's office and opened the door to be greeted by the faces of Tsunade and Shikamaru. He nodded towards Shikamaru before addressing the Hokage. Reporting in, Granny. Her nose crinkled in annoyance. Apparently his good mood was unsuccessful in transferring to the 5th Hokage. Even when you're a Jonin, you still act like a child. Naruto slapped his hand down in the air dismissively. Bah, I'll still call you Granny when I'm Hokage, he said jokingly. Now, what am I looking at today? If you become Hokage, she grumbled before gesturing towards the Nara to her side, allow Shikamaru to explain, as he will be accompanying you for this mission. Taking his cue, the other new Junin started to speak. It's 2 missions in one. We're tasked with transporting confidential information gathered by our intelligence department to a dead drop in Suna. Normally a mission of this caliber would be assigned to someone below our ranking, but Suna suspects that their drop zone has been compromised by a third party. We are to stake out the drop to confirm or deny this suspicion. Our observation ends when Suna's recovery team secures the information. Unless there is an interception, in which we will apprehend the third party. After this is completed, the second phase of the mission begins. This is where I continue on to Suna and you return back home. Shikamaru explained. During the monologue that Shikamaru was having, Naruto decided to half listen while he looked around the office. He had looked around this room so many times before, but each way he looked he noticed a new detail that he had never noticed before. When he looked to the wall he noticed how the framed pictures of the Hokage were not level with each other, and that the photos looked as if they were staring at him. He looked at the ceiling and traced a crack in it with his eyes. The crack was minuscule, and he was sure it was new, but he did not dwell on it long before he looked forward to the Hokage's desk in the front of the room. When he looked, he was met with a peculiar sight. Floating in the air was a hardcover, hefty book. It was large in size and its cover was decorated with little gold stitching. It was also spinning closer and closer to him, and it was too late before he noticed where it was going. Thud. Did you even hear a word he said? Tsunade barked. Naruto winced. The corner of the book hit him right between the eyes and the impact was violent enough to get him to see stars. Yeah, we gotta drop some dead guys off at their third party and watch if they get suspicious. He answered confidently. His arms were crossed and he nodded his head up and down, proud with his listening skills. I think you hit him too hard, Lady Tsunade. Shikamaru offered. I don't think I hit him hard enough. She replied. Get a move on you too. Shikamaru gave a nod and walked out the office, taking Naruto with him. The blonde tripped over his own legs during the first few steps, but they safely exited the Hokage mansion. Man, this book hurt like hell. Naruto said as he inspected the projectile. Both the back and front cover were void of any text, so Naruto opened up the book while walking with Shikamaru. To his disappointment, the pages in the book were about as empty as his mind during the debriefing. It was not his fault that he got easily distracted, but it was this useless book's fault for causing him pain. He spotted a trash can and veered off towards it to toss the stack of kindling away. Don't do that, Shikamaru said after noticing Naruto's intent. Why not? The book was inches away from falling into the garbage. That's our confidential information. This, he asked while tapping the book. This is nothing but blank pages. To confirm this, he flipped through every page, showing it to his partner. He was right, every page was as white as the abominable snowman cheeks. Exactly. We're not going to drop off actual information if there's a breach in security, he explained. Naruto looked at the painful book before frowning, stowing it away in his back pouch, and continuing to walk to the village gate with Shikamaru. After some time walking, Naruto started up the conversation again. So, I know what to do after the first phase is done, but why are you continuing on to Suna? Naruto asked. Shikamaru faltered, if only for a moment, before he responded. Naruto still picked up on it and was now intrigued. Just like that book in your pocket, it is confidential information. He said. Can I at least get the idea? He asked. The genius of the two knew the other was not going to give up their prying easily and decided to give him some vague information. Just to try and satiate his curiosity. I'm supposed to meet with a member of the council there. We need to discuss things. Oh, really? Is it someone I know? Can you tell me their name? Shikamaru shook his head rapidly. Classified, he said and shoved his hands deep into his pockets. Naruto's mouth shaped into a sly smile. His teammates' reluctance gave him an idea of what it was about. Shikamaru saw the way Naruto looked and gave him a cautionary glance. Oh, that's weird. Her name's classified. I thought it was Tamari. The reaction he got from Shikamaru all but confirmed it. I don't know what you're talking about. His head quickly turned upwards while a hand reached up to scratch his temple. I think you know exactly what I am talking about, champ. Now, do you request all the missions to Suna or do you keep it on the down low and only request half of them? Will you accept any answer? Shikamaru's cheeks were red with embarrassment. Similarly to how Naruto's were earlier that day. Only the one I'm looking for. Naruto said in a sing-song voice. This was going to be fun. It was not every day that Naruto got under the Nara's skin. And here I thought this mission would be a cakewalk. Troublesome. A face was covered by two hands. A cakewalk. Do you know who I am? Naruto asked, almost offended. His answer was Shikamaru digging through his flak jacket and producing a pack of cigarettes and a lighter. He pulled a stick out with his mouth and shook his hand to open the lighter. The cigarette was soon ignited, and smoke escaped from the brown-haired man's mouth. The lighter shut with a loud click and both it and the pack returned to their storage place. Naruto Uzumaki, he finally said, trying to keep the cancer stick from falling out of his mouth. Man, this sand-ass. A certain blonde complained. He tugged at a section of his sand-covered shemagh and pulled it down to cool his face. Airborne sand instantly caked his lower face, and he rubbed his mouth and spat out sand before quickly pulling the fabric back up. He wished he did not need to wear the head covering, but after the flying grains assaulted his bare skin, he realized that it was either wear the appropriate attire or be pelted by sand. His head wrap was a dull, pale color, and it matched the barren dunes that he walked. It also matched with the rest of his clothing, which replaced his standard garb. His tan pants were taped tight starting at his shins, and his long-sleeve shirt was also taped off starting at the elbows. This was done to prevent sand from getting in, but it did not do anything for ventilation. It also did a very good at disguising Naruto, who was a very recognizable face around the nations. Just our luck that the mission has us going straight through a desert during a sandstorm, Shikamaru said through his own shemagh. His attire was similar to Naruto's, but with slight variations. He enjoyed getting hit by the sand as much as being constantly teased about Tamari by his comrade. What made it worse was that the storm prevented him from lighting up. The two continued to cover ground until they found a suitable place to set up a temporary camp. It was an old, crumbling building that had been long abandoned. Sand had been blown up against one of its walls and collected into a dune as high as the one-story house. They opened the door and sand slid out of the house. The weight of the sand must have made a window give way, because on the inside the actual floor could not be seen through the uneven lumps of sand. Great. I've always wanted to sleep in a literal sandbox, Naruto deadpanned. He sat down onto the sand and was relieved to feel its coolness. The powerful wind could still be heard tearing through the dunes, even with the door shut. Better this than outside, Shikamaru replied and took his backpack off. He dug through it and pulled out a canteen to take a drink. He then pulled out a portable burner and pot, and began the process of boiling water. While he was doing this, Naruto pulled out the decoy information and began tossing it up in the air and catching it to occupy himself while they waited for the water to boil. He eventually grew tired of tossing the book and began doodling in its pages. So, how far out are we from the dead drop? Naruto asked, looking up from the bool he was scribbling in. Not far at all now. If we move at dawn, we'll make it well before noon. We'll have plenty of time to set up and watch the drop. He matched Naruto and reclined onto the surprisingly inviting sand pile. Niece. Where is it, anyway? A small halfway village used by caravans to resupply and rest. It should be a pretty quiet town, a perfect place to leave information. Shikamaru said as the water in the pot rolled in a steady boil. He grabbed the pot with his now unwrapped shimog and poured some of the steaming hot liquid into an instant ramen cup. He reached farther and poured the rest into the other ramen cup that was in Naruto's hands. Thank you, the blonde said. Most people would prefer something ice cold after trekking through a desert during a harsh sandstorm, but not the blonde who dug into his personal ambrosia. He could eat only ramen for the rest of his life. Eat up, Shikamaru said while watching in wonder as his teammate demolished the piping hot instant ramen. The small flame that was warming the pot stayed lit, the two used it as a light source. They enjoyed their noodles in a comfortable silence. Well, a silence if Naruto's loud slurping was ignored. The desert lacked the usual jamboree of animals that the forests they were used to had, but the small crackling of the flame and the sound of blown wind hitting the walls around them gave them company. They finished their meals and each of them sifted sand into a somewhat flat space large enough to put a sleeping bag on. They both got into their respective bags and put the small, dwindling flame between them. Naruto was on his back with his hands crossed underneath his head, looking through a crack in the roof and into the night sky. There were no clouds in the sky, and their distance from any major civilizations eliminated light pollution. It was perfect stargazing conditions, and as Naruto looked at the heavens above, a question he had formed earlier in the day returned. Shikamaru. Naruto suddenly asked. MN. He replied through his pillow. You and Tamari. How does it work out? Shikamaru turned his head out from the pillow and faced the other man. What do you mean? I mean, you two live in separate villages, and you barely get to visit each other, right? Right. He was not sure where this conversation was going, but was still going to humor him. Doesn't that make it hard on both of you? Neither of you get to see each other when you want to. It's definitely not a favorable situation. I would rather us be available to each other whenever, but we are making things work out just fine. I'm glad. There was a short silence between the two before Shikamaru started back up. Since when have you been one to ask these sorts of questions, Naruto? Shikamaru questioned with his eyes squinting to scrutinize the man across the burner. Are you trying to make a long-distance relationship work? Naruto put his hands up like he was guilty and tried to take the heat off of himself. No, nothing like that. I was just curious as to how you keep a relationship when you're both so busy and far away. I would think most people in your situation would have given up. There was another short silence before Shikamaru spoke again. Well, when we do have time together, we make the most of it. How so? We try to do enjoyable and memorable things. Trying new things, unique experiences, stuff like that. That way, when we have a great time, our happiness satiates us until the next time we meet. The reward makes the wait worth it. He concluded and went to sleep. Naruto did not go to bed with his friend. Instead, he continued to gaze through the crack in the roof. A strong gust of wind blew some sand in through that same crack, and the grains came plummeting down onto the awake man's face. He was not expecting it, so many granules fell into his eyes. He slammed his eyes closed and shook his head in minor pain. His eyes watered excessive as he rubbed them in silent agony. Damn it! He finally yelled while fisting his eyes. His predicament woke his companion up. What are you doing? He said, annoyed at being awoken. Naruto had just finished clearing his eyes of sand when he said it. He blinked multiple times before answering. I can't see. That usually happens when it's night time. No, not like that. He said and faced the Nara. It was too late though, as snores filled the room. Naruto sighed and leaned away, this time making sure to keep his face away from the crack. He fell asleep soon after. As Shikamaru said the night before, they left as the sun began to rise, and reached the town well before noon. It was an inconspicuous town as any, with a small amount of locals and merchants doing their tasks as they always have. The two Konoha nins dropped the decoy at the drop about an hour after making it to the stop, and they had been watching it for 2 hours after that. Both of them had grown tired of waiting around for someone to jack the book, but only the blonde was outwardly annoyed. He fidgeted around in his prone position on the flat rooftop of his building. It was a great position, but it sure did feel like an oven with the high sun cooking the top of his roof and himself. He was frying like an egg on a skillet. Shikamaru was across from him, pretending to be an ordinary patron at a small open bar. Together they sandwiched the dead drop, which was a small, decrepit well. Naruto, even though he had been doing this for hours, diligently scanned the scene from his perch again. He quickly spotted a group of 3 suspicious men enter the town and looked at Shikamaru to see his partner discreetly radio to him. "My 7 o'clock, you see them? 3 unknowns, haven't seen him before," Naruto confirmed. He was excited at the prospect of action. Hopefully, all this waiting would be worth it, and he would be able to crack some skulls. "Let's see where this goes." As he said that, the group of 3 split into 2 groups, leaving one alone. The group of 2 walked towards the bar that Shikamaru was stationed at, making him quickly cut off radio communication. The loner stayed by the well, and appeared to be digging through his supply bag for supplies. He pulled out his canteen, opened it, and checked for liquid. The container was empty, so he turned to the well and started to reel up the water bucket. The well had dried up years ago, and most of the regular visitors knew that. He dipped his canteen down into the bucket and came up with it and the book. The man took a swig while deftly stowing the book away into his utility pouch and walked to his companions at the bar. Naruto saw that Shikamaru was no longer at the bar. "Those are not the designated couriers," Shikamaru said from beside Naruto. The blonde turned his head over to look at his partner. "Definitely not, but they took the book, so you know what that means," Naruto said with a smile. "Let's wait for them to skip town. I don't want any civvies getting in the crossfire if things go south. That was my plan. I have a reverse summoning seal on the book. When they get far enough away and they decide to take a peek." Naruto paused deviously. "Party time. Good on you, but will that summoning take me too? Not unless you want it to. Even then, it can spit you out far enough away for you to launch a sneaky attack." "Well, let's get to waiting then. I can't wait to watch the fireworks." "Me neither," Naruto said. The 3 men who had the drop left as soon as they came, and they continued to walk away from the town until they reached a cavern in the side of a large stone formation. Drifts of sand disguised the entrance well, and the trio felt confident in their safety. They sat around a small lamp, with the book in the hands of the one who retrieved it. Their shadows stretched over the cave wall, making unnatural shapes. All of the men were chomping at the bit to see what secrets the book contained. The leader slowly turned back the front cover of the book, and stared at the book with wide eyes. He blinked multiple times, as if to clear his eyes, and his head swiftly moved back and forth over the pages. He hurriedly flipped pages and pages, and his movements became more fevered the more pages he flipped. The 2 others quickly grew worried at their boss's antics and wanted to know what caused his actions. "What's it say, boss?" the fat one asked. "It's..." The leader was at a loss for words. He was practically shaking. He stared at the pages, completely enraptured by their contents. His silence interested his companions. "What? It's what?" the second man said. This man had very thick glasses and a very noticeable bald spot. It's a bunch of ins," he screamed madly. The other 2 were taken aback, and they worried that their leader had gone mad. "Lemme see that," the one with glasses demanded. After it was handed to him, he gasped, and the fat man wanted his turn to gawk. "Over here," he said with an open hand. Once he got the book and took a glance. It was true, on the pages were crudely drawn S. His face, like those of his two buddies, also turned into one of confusion and anger. Can I take a look? A fourth man asked. Without hesitation, the fat man handed over the book and let the man inspect the pages. After a few seconds of inspection, he shook his head and clicked with his tongue. I do have to admit, it's not my best work. The three men then noticed what was wrong with the situation and whipped their heads around to look at the new addition to their team. Oh, hi, Naruto said while giving a jolly wave. The three men had scowls on their faces and each of them drew a weapon out of anger. They knew that the man in front of them was behind it all. Tips of swords poked dangerously at the giddy blonde. What? You don't like my art? Naruto feigned being offended. He had a hand over his heart and concerned eyes. Boys, murder this fool. The leader commanded. They were all going to charge and attack Naruto, but they found themselves stuck in place. They struggled against this unconquerable force until Shikamaru spoke up from the shadows. The more you move, the tighter it binds. So, unless you want your guts to pop out of your body, I suggest you stop struggling. The three stopped resisting the shadows. Their anger was replaced with fear. Now that that's over with, let's take you guys to Suna. I'm sure they'd love to deal with you three troublemakers. The three restrained men quivered. Each of them had spent time in Suna's prison, and they did not want to go back. The edge of Naruto's hand was the last thing they saw before they would wake up in a prison cell. All right, Naruto said as he withdrew 3 scrolls from his chest pouch. He then unraveled one and placed it on one of the unconscious men before sending chakra into it. A small flash occurred and all that was left afterwards was the scroll on the ground. It was rolled up again and had additional writing on it. He did the same process 2 more times then got up to go with Shikamaru. What now? Well, now that there was actually a breach in their information run, we are going to have to report it to Suna. So that's our next destination. Unless you want to go straight back to Konoha. I should be able to handle it from here. I think I'll go with you. It's been a while since I've visited Gaara. I need to tell him about my promotion. Alright, let's go. The two then began their way to Suna. When they arrived, the two greeted Gaara, who was already aware of their mission. They were then guided to the village's information department to drop off the prisoners. This mission couldn't have gone smoother. Thank you, Naruto, Shikamaru said as they left the Suna interrogation department. No problem, Shika. I'm glad things went as well as they did too. I want to get home as soon as possible. Yeah, hey, Naruto, what was that they said about the S in the book? Did you actually draw that in it? Yeah, Naruto replied nonchalantly. His stride never faltered, but Shikamaru stopped dead in his tracks. The young genius had a look of confusion on his face, something that was very rare for him. Why? Was the $1,000,000 question. I needed to disguise the ceiling array somehow, didn't I? I guess, Shikamaru said, absolutely flabbergasted. You have fun with Tamari now. Alright, see you when you get back. Naruto said as his voice got farther and farther away. Shikamaru stood there for a moment, before whipping out a cigarette and lighting it. He shook his head in disbelief but then smiled. That man is something else, huh? The village gate was a sight that was all too familiar with Naruto, but it still gave him a warm feeling in his heart when he gazed at the strong and protecting barrier after returning from a mission. It was the first landmark, besides the dense forests around him, that represented his closeness to home. His pace quickened when he saw the massive gate. Now instead of a brisk walk he was jogging to the gate with a smile on his face. He slowed back down to a walk to greet the gatekeepers warmly, who were more than happy to see him, and then he made his way to the Hokage Tower. When he reached the entrance to the tower and opened the main door, he was surprised and glad to see Sasuke talking to the receptionist. He, like Naruto, had just returned from a mission and was alerting the lady at the desk that he had plans to see the Hokage. Naruto guessed that whatever words Sasuke was saying were going right over the head of the young receptionist, because all she was doing during the conversation was nodding, blushing, and staring at the Uchiha. Naruto, oblivious as he could be at times, was easily able to pick out that the young woman was flustered over being so close to the man, and Naruto told himself to turn his friend onto that fact. Naruto figured that the brooder could get lonely, so he wanted to show him some options to replace going out on missions. After Sasuke finished whatever he was doing, he made his way up to the Hokage. Naruto walked up to the desk with haste, as he wanted to catch up to Sasuke, and spoke to the lady. "I'm back from my mission. See ya." He said it so fast the lass barely had enough time to register that a new person had come. She looked to where he was going and tried to stop him with a meekly raised hand. Hey, wait, Naruto, someone is already seeing Lady Hokage," she said with surprise still lingering in her voice. Naruto, who already had the door to the stairs half open, seemed to weigh her words in his head for a brief moment before speaking. Like she cares. With that he entered the staircase, leaving a bewildered receptionist staring at where he once was. He climbed 2 steps at a time to get to Sasuke faster. He reached his friend before they left the staircase, and Sasuke was indifferent to his arrival but acknowledged his presence. That did not stop Naruto from striking up a conversation, though. "So, what do you think about Mimiri?" he asked. Who, for a so-called prodigy, he sure could be dense at times. Mimiri, the receptionist. Naruto was confused as to how Sasuke didn't know the girl's name. She had been working as the Hokage's receptionist for a while now, and she was quite talkative and friendly. Naruto, the chatterbox that he was, had held quite long conversations with her before, making him know her well. It surprised him that Sasuke wouldn't even know her name. "That's her name." His response irked Naruto, but he decided to overlook it. "Anyway, what do ya think of her? She seems to not be all there." "She was just preoccupied, but that's not what I'm asking about. She's kinda cute, don't ya think?" He stabbed Sasuke in the reba with his elbow to try and get a reaction. The Uchiha put a hand where he was hit and gave his former teammate a squinted eye stare. "Why are you asking me this? I am just looking out for you, bro, you know. You're trying to play matchmaker for me?" he asked incredulously. "Nah, man, I'm just trying to open your eyes a little. 2 possibilities. Opportunities. I don't need your help to find someone, Naruto. Besides, she's not my type." Now it was Naruto's turn to question his friend's words. "How come? She's a civilian, and not built like how I would like." Naruto slapped his forehead as if he had remembered something important. "Oh yeah," he began, "I forgot you like muscular girls with chest hair and a pipe between their legs." Sasuke was visibly offended. Well, why don't you go after her?" Naruto scanned his head for an answer but couldn't find one that he knew Sasuke would accept. He knew the answer for himself, but he couldn't find out how to put the feeling into words. Mimiri was a nice girl, and a good looker too, but he had no desire to pursue her romantically. "I'm good," he answered. Sasuke accepted the answer, probably because he didn't want to continue talking about the current subject, and because they were both about to enter the Hokage's office. Naruto took a handle and twisted it, and they both stepped inside and greeted their leader. "Granny. Lady Hokage. Sasuke." She nodded to him then looked at the blonde brat. "Another successful mission for me, Gran. Though I can't say the same for him, given his track record. My mission was a success as well. Glad to hear it, boys. I'd like to have a report from each of you when you get the chance. Sasuke, I take it you want another mission. If that's possible, Lady Hokage. It is, kept one open just for you. Here." She pulled back a drawer and grabbed a scroll inside. She tossed it to Sasuke, who stowed it away in his chest pouch and gave his thanks before leaving. Naruto watched him leave and gave a whistle of astonishment. "Never takes a day off, does he?" Naruto asked Tsunade. "The only days he takes off are the ones I make mandatory. He has a great work ethic, but at the rate he's going he'll run himself into the ground. Yeah, he's always away from home. Mikoto told me he's usually out the door before the sun's up. Tsunade's eyes widened in surprise. You've spoken to Mikoto? Yeah. Sasuke invited me to his house recently and I had a chance to meet her. Why are you surprised? Mikoto has been sort of a recluse since the massacre. I'm probably the one who has spent the most time with her since, but even my time is limited, being the Hokage. She sure has kept to herself. Before I met her, I didn't even know what she looked like. I doubt anyone who hasn't met her prior knows either. It's quite sad. She used to be so outgoing and happy. Much more than the average Uchiha. Tsunade had a distant and melancholy look in her eyes, as if remembering the good days. I'm sure she'll perk up soon. Everybody has their dark days, but the sun rises for everyone. Anyway, do I have any missions lined up? No, there aren't any at the moment that require your unique skill set. I'll be sure to call you down when one comes around. Alright, sounds good. See ya then, Granny. He said and then went to open the door. Have a good one, Naruto. Tsunade said. I'll make sure to. I'm visiting a friend today. He had the door opened and was leaving when he said this. He softly closed the door and made his way back down the stairs. When he came to the bottom of the stairs, he was greeted with a similar situation to the one he had seen when he first entered the tower. Sasuke was back talking to Mimiri, only this time he actually seemed to be holding a conversation with her, rather than just reporting in. Naruto smiled, thinking that his words had reached the stubborn Uchiha. When Sasuke looked over and saw Naruto standing at the bottom of the staircase, he ended the conversation with Mimiri abruptly but still said his thanks. When Naruto came up to him and put a hand on his shoulder, he had a Cheshire grin until they left the tower. So, still not your type, Sasuke? He searched his mind for the words, she's nice. What does that mean? Could he be any more vague? Exactly what it means, idiot. She's nice. I'm not sure where to go from here. Home is a good start. Good idea. I need to get out of this desert gear before the sand scrapes away my skin. You stopping at your own house before you skip town? Yeah, but only for a moment. I need to grab supplies. Welp. See you when you get back from your mission then. See ya. Naruto gave a pat on the back to his friend. Till then. Sasuke gave a lazy wave and the two went on their separate ways. Naruto, not wanting to walk in his sand gear any longer than he had to, decided to teleport straight to his home to clean up. He stepped into the bathroom and began unwrapping the cloth that sealed his clothing tight. With every twirl that made the wrap loosen, sand fell to the floor and made a light tinkling sound. By the last wrap, Naruto had a sizable pile on the floor that was beginning to spread out and settle. His boots carried even more sand, and when he turned them upside down, a long, steady stream of grains flowed out and onto the floor. Making a damn sand castle in my bathroom. Should have done this outside. When he finished removing all of his sand-covered clothes, he looked at the large pile on his floor in annoyance, and then, with a quick swipe of his hand, he used wind chakra to carry the sand up and out the small window in his bathroom. He didn't care where it went, as long as it left his house. After it was gone he hopped into the shower and cleaned himself off, making all the sand that still managed to stay on his body wash away. By the time he finished his shower, dried, and dressed, he had formulated an activity to do with Mikoto. One that he hoped would be memorable and fun for the both of them. With that idea bouncing around in his head he made his way to the Uchiha district, where his new friend waited for his return. The Uchiha district was not any less ominous than the first time he visited. At least, the unoccupied buildings had not become any more inviting. The house that sheltered the last remaining Uchihas on the other hand was a well-kept beacon of light in the otherwise gloomy neighborhood. Naruto could practically feel the warmth of the house when his fist hit the front door. A short moment after, the door opened and a smiling woman stood at the threshold. Hey Mikoto, is Sasuke here? He knew that his walkover gave Sasuke plenty of time to collect his necessary gear and leave for his mission, but just in case he asked. He didn't want his friend to get suspicious of his actions. He left about 15 minutes ago. It's just you and me now. If it were under different circumstances, that sentence would have carried a much different meaning, but those circumstances were not met yet. Great. Can I come in? I have some things to talk about. Mikoto backed up and out of the door frame and gestured for him to come inside. He did, and they found themselves sitting on the couch. The woman was looking intensely at Naruto, waiting for him to speak. She had no idea what he was going to say, so she did not want to miss a word. The enthusiasm she displayed with her eyes alone slightly unnerved the man, and there was an awkward period of time between him sitting on the couch and when he began to speak. He tried to formulate the monologue in his head to be as understandable as possible. After he did, he spoke to her. I'm free for the rest of today, but as I said before, there will be days, weeks even when I won't be around to spend time with you. I have an idea though. The days I am available we can do really fun things together, so the time in between isn't so unbearable for you. What kinds of activities? All sorts really. Experiencing new things, doing unique things, anything that we think would be fun to do. All to enjoy ourselves enough to keep us happy through the downtime. What do ya say? Is that something you'd want to do? That sounds great, but aren't we limited to doing things in private? I don't like the attention I get at crowded places in general, and I don't think being seen spending time with someone else's mother is especially good for your well-being. Especially if news made it to Sasuke. You're right, I hadn't thought about that. He mulled it over before an idea came to his head. Why don't we just use the transformation jutsu to disguise us? We'd be free to do anything in the village if we looked like forgettable civilians. I think that just might work. Now that we don't have to worry about what we can and can't do, what did you have planned for tonight? I thought I could take you to the movies, and after that we can get something to eat. Are you game? It did not take long for her to answer. I haven't seen a movie in a long while. It should be fun. Great. He stood up from the couch and offered his hand to help her up. Let's see how this goes. Not so fast, mister, she said, amused at his enthusiasm. We still have to transform into our disguises. Right. Almost forgot. He weaved his fingers together to form the correct hand sign, with Mikoto copying his maneuvers. Together they both finished their techniques and created a decent plume of smoke that encompassed both of their forms. The white smokescreen soon dissipated into thin wisps and then disappeared entirely, revealing two new, completely unrecognizable people. Each person looked at the other, judging the effectiveness of their technique. Naruto lost his whisker marks, looked to be middle-aged, and possessed brown hair and eyes. Mikoto's transformation was just as disguising as Naruto's. Her distinct jet black hair was replaced with long strands of light brown, and her pale skin was darkened a few shades. Her age stayed similar to her own, but she looked nothing like her actual appearance. They both wore dull, civilian clothing to not draw attention onto themselves. Together the two made an inconspicuous duo, and both were confident that their true identities were properly hidden. Looking good, Naruto joked. You too. Are we ready? I am if you are, he said and offered the woman his arm. She s her own arm around his and the two exited the house and began their night on the town. Their first of many, as it would come to be. Their excursion to the movie theater was one that went as smooth as it possibly could. The disguises worked flawlessly, with no one at the theater paying any attention to the couple. It also helped that they bought tickets to a screening of an older movie. It was a blockbuster when it first was released, but it had ample time to stagnate, and it was no longer drawing in crowds of viewers. They did not choose to see it because of this reason, but because Mikoto and Naruto had never seen it before. They were surprised and inwardly relieved when they saw how little an amount of viewers were actually going to be watching the movie with them. Even though Mikoto was confident they would not be bothered by people, no matter how many, she still felt more comfortable with fewer people. They sat near the back of the room, where the density of people was at its lowest. Both were glad that they had the opportunity to sit practically wherever they wanted. Mikoto because she liked her privacy, and Naruto because he liked sitting in an actual theater seat. Most times when he had gone to movies, the place was so packed he had to watch the movie upside down, hanging from the ceiling. The two liked the movie enough to stay through its entirety, but Naruto's comedic sideline commentary made it even more enjoyable. He would sneak in jokes about the movie whenever he could, and when it was timed well, he had Mikoto in stitches. After they left the theater, the two headed to Naruto's go-to ramen spot. The ramen lover couldn't be too enthusiastic though, as he was sure to get recognized there just by his demeanor. He doubted that it would matter if they found out, but loose lips sink ships, and a yame was a gossip dispensary. They ate quietly there, only talking amongst themselves, until they offered their thanks and left for Mikoto's house. Their walk back was an enjoyable one. The moon and periodic streetlight illuminated their path, and passerbys must have contracted their good mood as everyone on a late-night stroll greeted them kindly. The occasional streetlights soon became non-existent when they approached the Uchiha grounds, and now the only thing giving them light was that big rock in the sky. Naruto was nervous walking through the Uchiha compound alone in the daytime, and he was sure that if he was alone right now, he would be shaking in his boots. Having Mikoto accompany him through the deserted compound made him feel at ease. To him it seemed that a ghost town was scarier than actual ghosts. Their night together had to end, as all nights do, and Naruto was once again standing outside of Mikoto's house, with that same person standing at the threshold. He had his arm leaning on the side of the door nearest the bug-swarmed porch light, saying his goodbyes to the woman. "So, how do you think tonight went?" he asked. "I had a great time. It was nice to finally go out to some place other than a bar. I'm glad. It was fun for me, too. Was it good enough to do something like this next time? I'd love to." "Fantastic. Thanks for letting me do this with you, Mikoto. I should be the one thanking you. Without your help, I would be sitting in my house alone." "Well, I'd do anything to help a friend out." Mikoto smiled brightly and leaned in closer to Naruto. She raised her hand and curled her pointer finger 3 times in quick succession. Naruto, seeing this, leaned in also. She gave him a quick peck on the cheek, one that the blonde wasn't expecting. He jolted a little, and a hand came up to feel his cheek. "I hope the next time will be even better. Good night, Naruto," she said with a giggle. I don't own Naruto. Also, this chapter contains mature material. Wink wink. Mikoto and Naruto's first excursion was such a smashing success that the two soon went on their second, and then third. The weeks rolled by and the two spent time with one another at least once a week. They had kept going out into the village, experiencing life and making memories that both would look back fondly upon. They would meet together whenever Sasuke was out of the village and Naruto was not on a mission. They had it down to a science, often meeting each other already in their disguises that had become as familiar as their actual appearance over the months. They had become comfortable in their fake personas, and played the parts of a loving couple as good as the highest paid actors. Neither knew it, or would admit it, but they weren't exactly acting. The idea was spurred on by the amount of comments the two would get at restaurants by the staff. The first time a waiter suggested the two were in a relationship, Naruto tripped over his words while trying to make an excuse as to why they were together, but he soon found himself smiling, nodding, and playing the part that he was given. Mikoto also became comfortable with the front, enough to hold his hand when they walked the busy Konoha streets. Tonight was scheduled to be another one of their nights together, but it was not going to be an ordinary one. Mikoto's birthday was coming up soon, something that Naruto had learned during his extensive time with her, and he wanted to surprise her with something extravagant and special. It just happened to be extremely expensive too, something that he lamented, but he reasoned with himself that it was not going to be a common thing. That, and his high-ranking mission pay would foot the bill. He was going to take her to one of the highest quality restaurants in Konoha, and she was none the wiser to this. He hoped that she would enjoy it. Actually, he hoped both of them would enjoy it. He had never been to a place nearly as pricey as this one, and he wanted to get his money's worth. He was walking casually to their rendezvous spot, transformation already concealing his true identity. His attire was not his usual though. It was formal. A black tuxedo with an equally black tie strangling his neck was what he wore. He wasn't technically wearing it, given that it was part of the transformation, but he still hated the concept of wearing something so restraining. He also stood out like a sore thumb at the location he was at, which was a simple grocery store on the outskirts of the market district. Mikoto was supposed to be waiting to meet him at a bench farther up the hill, and when he reached it he was waved down by the woman of the hour. She was happy to see him, but it was obvious that she was confused at his attire. He didn't have time to explain to her as to what they were going to do beforehand because it was spent getting a reservation, which was a tedious process that Naruto never wanted to experience again. Mikoto gave him a hug and asked him what the suit was about. It's for where we're going tonight. It's one of those 5-star places in the rich district. Really? She asked, astonished at the prospect of them going to such an establishment. Which one? I got no clue how to pronounce the name, so I'll spare your ears and not butcher it, but I know what the front of the building looks like. What about my outfit? Go for anything you'd like, as long as it's fancy enough to keep you from getting kicked out. Transformations give you a lot of artistic freedom. Then why did you go with black suit number 1? She joked about his generic yet respectable clothing. Would you rather it be a bright orange? 'Cause I can do that for you. He leaned against her. No thanks. Is it clear? Naruto closed his eyes and focused in on the nature energy around him. No spying eyes here besides mine. Go ahead and show me what you have in mind. With the go ahead, Mikoto signed her way into the technique for the second time that day, and the iconic smokescreen puffed into existence. Naruto watched it dissipate in curiosity for what was hidden by it. The bland civilian clothes that were staples of her disguise were replaced by a black, shoulderless dress that ended below her knees. It was eye-catching, and the body wearing it filled it out very well. Which it should have, given that the whole thing was a specially engineered transformation jutsu. This fact didn't deter Naruto from being impressed, and his eyes lingered for a healthy amount. You look beautiful, perfect for where we're going. Thank you. I thought of what I used to wear back when Fugaku and I would go out to extravagant places. As she said this, she inspected herself and nodded. Well, if you looked remotely as good as you do now, you must have had trouble dealing with all the men fawning over you. He gave a smile, one that she copied. Not exactly. Fugaku did a good job scaring them off. Goose all have to do the same tonight, huh? He put his hand into his pocket and pointed his elbow towards Mikoto, who hooked her own arm through the hole he made. Let's be off then. We have a whole night ahead of us. Let's make the most of it, she said. The two then took off for the restaurant, catching the looks of many people, both men and women, as they walked by. They did not pay any mind to the observing eyes, they were too busy talking between themselves. Their conversation carried on throughout the entirety of their walk, which seemed like a quick one to them. This is it, Naruto said as they walked up to a glass door. He opened and held it for Mikoto, and he closed it slowly, making sure to not slam it shut. He really did not want to pay for a shattered door. He walked behind her by a few feet before closing the distance and meeting the staff member working the front desk. Good evening. Reservations? He was a burly man with a handlebar mustache, which somehow made him look even more intimidating. Mikoto and Naruto both wondered if this guy was in the right place. An underground boxing ring seemed to suit him more than an eloquent establishment. Yeah, two under the name Narumi. The man put on a pair of ludicrously small, round glasses and flipped through a couple pages of the paper on his counter. His thick finger tapped on a specific area of the sheet and he smiled. Ah yes, right this way. He led them through the reception and into the dining area, where Naruto was impressed by the ornateness of it all. They were then seated at a booth, which was separated from the others with a meticulously trimmed bush. I will be back shortly with the menus. With that, the hulking man left the two alone. So, Narumi, where'd you come up with that? I combined our first names. I know it's not original, but I didn't have a whole lot of time to come up with a last name when making the reservation. Better than what I would have come up with. This place is really something else, huh? Have you ever been here before? Not to this one in particular, but I've been to similar places. This one has impressed me the most, though. Are you sure you're okay with spending this much? I'd pay more if it meant making you happy. Mikoto blushed. Thinking like that will leave you sleeping in the streets, she said with a smile. Naruto felt her foot brush up against his leg. You have expensive tastes, then. As he said that, the jolly giant returned to their table and set down two menus. Here are your menus. Any questions? Yeah, I don't think I ever caught your name. Oh, my mistake. I am Biff. Biff. Is that like a family name? Oh yes. My father's name was Biff, and his father's too. Actually, all males in my family share the same name. That must cause a lot of confusion during the holidays. Naruto joked. Mikoto put a hand to her lips. It certainly does, but we honor the tradition that has been with us for as long as we can remember. What happens if you never get another boy in the family to name Biff? If it's a girl, she will be named Biffany. As all the other girls in our lineage have been named. Naruto was having trouble keeping a straight face. Where are you from, Biff? Biffuania. No, I'm from Kusa. It was a standard answer, but it was so far off from what Naruto expected that he could not keep his laughs in any longer. Mikoto also giggled, encouraged by Naruto. It was just a few chuckles, but Biff looked at the two without any humor. His head dropped and faced the floor, and Naruto got a little worried. Biff? He asked, concerned. Biff's head quickly shot up and his face had noticeably changed. His soft eyes became harsh, and they seemed to glow with energy. His handlebar mustache also had grown, making the two curls reach all the way up to his eyebrows. Is it something we said? Biff's hairy arm shot out in a direction. Go, he said, and the two felt inclined to do so. They made their way back to where they entered from, and as they made their way to the door, an older lady, hunched over from her years of living, spoke to the two with an understanding tone. Biff gets awfully protective of his family's tradition, but that's why he works here. Naruto was able to see her name tag, which said her name was Biffany. Family owned, yeah, a nod was all he got and needed. He really needed to get away. His sanity was slipping. Have a good night. He exited the restaurant with Mikoto right behind him. He took a look at Mikoto, who looked more confused than a crayon-eating toddler on his sixth pack. What just happened? I'm not quite sure myself. I think we got kicked out, but I do know one thing. We still need to get something to eat, and I know exactly where to go. That's two things, but I'm with you. To ramen. Naruto yelled like a crusader charging into battle. This night just keeps getting weirder. She was being pulled along by Naruto like how a large dog pulls against its leash. Naruto's eagerness to reach his favorite meal led them to arrive at Ichiraku's quickly, but his enthusiasm instantly dissipated when he saw the stand shut down for the night. He grabbed both sides of his face in horror. That's right. The old man said he would be closing early today. How could I forget? He sank to the ground in despair. Well, what are we going to do now? Mikoto asked, and Naruto got back onto his feet with a jump. I was planning on eating here then showing you a pretty good view, but now I think we can do the old-fashioned thing and have a picnic. Pick up some things on our way there. What do you think? Fine with me. Where are we going? Oh, you're gonna love it when you see it. The view's great, Naruto said as they started walking. He continued his conversation with Mikoto throughout their walk, but kept himself from directly saying where they were going. He just gave her enticing details that provoked anticipation in the Uchiha. When they entered the same small grocery store that was near their rendezvous zone, their conversation had already drifted into a new subject entirely. They stood side by side as they glanced through the wall of wine in the store. Naruto had no clue what he was looking for because he was never one for wine, and he hoped that Mikoto could bail him out. She did, and she pulled out a dark bottle with a gold label and matching cork. She presented her choice to her companion, who dumbly nodded. An extravagant night tonight, you too? The clerk asked, commenting on their appearances. They both smiled. It hasn't gone exactly as planned, but we're working with what we got. Naruto said with a hand behind his head. I've enjoyed my time so far. It can only get better from here, Mikoto answered as the cashier placed the wine bottle into a plastic bag along with a stack of red plastic cups. Well, have a good one, you too, he nodded with a smile while extending the bag towards Naruto's hands. Thank you. Good night, they both said as Naruto opened the door. The moon was fully shining as they made their way to Naruto's spot. Their path was flanked on either side by dense forest, and the creatures of the night sang through the branches. The path then cleared up into a wide open field, with a sudden drop at the other end. They walked to the edge of the cliff and Mikoto realized they were above the Hokage monument. She could see every light from the village sparkle like grounded stars. It really is beautiful, she commented while her head panned across the village below. She found the Uchiha district easily, but that was because it had no light pollution. Seeing its darkness gave her a bittersweet smile. I knew you'd like it. Why don't you take a seat? Naruto said as he sat down and threw his legs over the side of the cliff. He patted the ground to his right and began digging through the contents of his plastic bag. Mikoto joined him down on the stone and was given a cup of alcohol. The both gave a testing sip from their respective cups. Naruto's mouth puckered slightly, tasting his first sip of wine ever. Mikoto looked at him, amused at the way his face contorted into a myriad of states. After he got over the first sip, he sighed and looked into his cup. Sorry about getting us kicked out of that restaurant. Mikoto had not even thought about that. She had been preoccupied with having fun walking the streets with the blonde. Oh no, it's fine. Is it though? Your birthday is coming up soon, and I kinda ruined a potentially amazing experience. No way, she said to correct him, what we're doing right now is an experience that I would rather have. I've been to plenty of fancy places, and they're all the same. I've never done something like this, and I can say that this experience is certainly a better one than what you get from those places. Really? Yeah, this is already one of the most memorable birthday celebrations I've had. Naruto's mouth curled up into a smile, and his previously down mood did a complete 180. Well, I'm glad I could give this to you, he said and took another drink. His face twisted back into the one he made at the first drink. He did not really like the experience, but he found himself wanting to take another sip. Just to see if it would be any different. So, when's the last time you drank wine out of a solo cup? Naruto asked with his legs kicking over the ledge of a triangular stone protrusion. Mikoto sipped out of her red cup, her shoulder against his and her own legs dangling over the cliff face. She tilted her head slightly and put a finger to her chin. Naruto stared at her pondering face that was no longer disguised. Since they were at such a remote part of the village, both of them had opted to see each other's true appearances. A decision both of them were happy to have made. I don't think I ever have, she answered and looked into his eyes. Her family status kept her free from all but the proper containers of alcohol, and the bars did not give out plastic either. There's a first to everything, I guess. Naruto raised his cup. Cheers. Cheers. Mikoto clinked her cup against Naruto's. Except, it didn't make a clinking sound, more like the sound of cheap plastic flexing. They stared in each other's eyes as they drank. Black meeting blue in the soft moonlight. Naruto traced her face with his eyes and was astounded by her beauty. This was the first time he had seen her without a disguise during one of their outings, and he studied her perfect features in awe. His hand came up to brush a stray hair away from her face, and somehow he found his hand cupping her cheek. Her brow raised in surprise, and the blonde felt awkward in the silence. You are incredibly beautiful. Did you know that? Naruto instantly felt the inside of his palm warm up, and he could feel his own face blush. The alcohol was giving him a little more confidence than what he usually had. Mikoto's face pushed into his hand. "You're very handsome for a boy your age," Mikoto responded. Naruto's eyes slightly squinted and he leaned an unnoticeable amount closer to her already near face. Looking at her, his mind flipped through all of the memories they had shared over the past 3 months. The two had an incredible amount of fun together, and Naruto could say for sure that he anticipated every one of their meetings with rabid excitement. Mikoto was a wonderful woman to be around, he had learned. Naruto may have started doing this for her out of empathy, but now he was doing it because he wanted to. "You know," he began, causing the woman to focus, "I've really enjoyed all these outings we've done together. You are such an amazing person to be around, and I can't wait for when I can get back from missions and see you again. I've had some great times with you, and I can't wait to experience some more." His hand fell from her face and down into the space below their two bodies, onto the warm hand of Mikoto. He gave it a light squeeze before the black-haired beauty motioned to come closer, with her free hand. He leaned in and gave her his undivided attention. "Why wait?" she asked coyly. Naruto had no time to ponder the meaning of her words before she took his mouth with her own. Naruto leaned into it without skipping a beat, and soon, the two were intensely exploring each other's mouths. Mikoto's hands up into his hair, and Naruto slid out and away from the ledge, all the while maintaining the exhilarating contact. Naruto propped himself above Mikoto with his arms and legs on either side of her body. Their tongues swirled together as Mikoto palmed his hair and face. Naruto kept one arm securely planted on the ground and used his other to rub the outside of her leg. They stayed in that position until their lungs couldn't handle the lack of air any longer. Two heads backed away from each other reluctantly, and an upside-down arch of saliva stretched between their mouths. Their bodies shook like they had been shocked with each harsh intake of breath. Their chests raised and lowered like they had just finished a marathon. Their swollen lips pulsed as they held each other in an unending stare. The way Mikoto's pitch-black eyes stared back at Naruto made him want to dive right back in. He would have, but a small wind blew in between the two, and Naruto felt a chill against his chest. He realized his jacket was opened, and that his mesh shirt was exposed. He gave Mikoto a hungry smile, one that was returned to him. "Let's get out of the cold, yeah." His answer was Mikoto raising the top half of her body to meet him again with a searing kiss. Balancing on one hand once more, Naruto signed and expelled some chakra before the entangled couple felt a tugging sensation. They were now in Naruto's living room, but the change in scenery did nothing to slow down their session. The teleportation did, however, change their position. Naruto was lying on his couch, with Mikoto lying flush on top of him. He guessed him being the jutsu caster and the seal being under the couch cushions oriented them this way. He welcomed the change though, and feverishly devoured Mikoto's mouth while shimmying off his now too hot jacket. Their new position now had the two pressed tightly against one another, and in their lust, they thrusted their hips towards each other. Naruto's clothed erection dug in against the denim of Mikoto's jeans. Both moaned from the sudden stimulation. They continued kissing and grinding until Mikoto broke the contact between their lips to tear off Naruto's mesh shirt. She sat straight up and threw it off to the side, and before it hit the ground, Naruto was beginning to tug at the bottom button of Mikoto's blouse. He could not get it through the slit with the gyrating that Mikoto was doing over his throbbing albeit still covered unit. With annoyance, he instead grabbed one side of each with his hands and opened the shirt, causing all of the buttons to fly loose from their stitches. The opening of the blouse was kind of like how superheroes quickly change from their disguises, except instead of a Superman logo being exposed, Mikoto's large, black lace-covered S were. It was an unbelievably wide look to Naruto, whose eyes were captivated by the S movements as his lover rubbed back and forth over the length of his member. Naruto his hands up to just below her bra, and Mikoto's top half swayed like a sultry dancer. He watched her movements with undivided attention. She suddenly stopped, and Naruto gave a quick but worried glance up to her eyes. She did not have a shade of regret in her eyes, and when their gazes locked, the black-haired beauty spoke up and raised herself off of him just a few inches. "I need you right now," she said quietly, but to Naruto the demand was a confident and powerful one. Naruto swallowed, enamored by the seductive woman on top of him. "Right now. I've been waiting for this for a while," she said as she fiddled with his belt buckle. It was hard for her to do as his waist was behind her back, and she was reaching down through her legs. Here. I got it," Naruto offered. It took him a few seconds before it was undone. As soon as it was, he pulled them down as far as he could without having to get the Uchiha off of him. His boxers were doing a poor job at concealing his massive erection, but so would anything that he wears. Mikoto looked down and behind her with an intense hunger, and her legs were shaking in her squatting position. She tucked a finger underneath the hem of his boxer shorts and pulled down, causing Naruto to have a sharp intake of breath when his rock-hard piece was exposed to the air. Mikoto gave his a look that filled his chest with pride. She was not able to contain her excitement and gasped. Naruto now noticed the wetness that soaked through her jeans. His pants, he was sure, also were damp. She then grabbed the hem of her own pants and pulled them down just barely enough to expose her. She obviously wanted to feel her lover as soon as possible. She reached behind herself and grabbed Naruto's meaty pole, who hissed in ecstasy at the feeling. She guided it straight to her dripping lips, and rubbed it against them and around the area, coating Naruto with her arousal. After an unbearable but short time of teasing, the matriarch lined up the obscene stick with her sopping center and plunged down onto it, impaling herself in euphoria. When she bottomed out, a guttural scream escaped her throat. "FFF yes," she said facing the ceiling. Naruto himself was also lost in pleasure, enveloped by an indescribable warmth and tightness. When Mikoto raised her hips up from his own, Naruto let out a moan, only for the MILF to slam right back down and send a thunderbolt of pleasure through the both of them. This happened repeatedly, with each time the process getting faster until Mikoto was in a constant state of bouncing on his. Her mouth stayed opened wide, shouting out and moaning every time his member stretched her insides. Naruto was not quiet either, as the heaven this woman was giving him was too good to shut up about. Their bodies also made a cacophony of. The meeting of their hips caused a large slapping sound to echo through the room, and Mikoto's only increasing arousal gushed around his stiff rod. "Shit, Mikoto, you're amazing." Every time Mikoto would raise herself from his groin, he would thrust forward in an attempt to stay in her warmth. This made it so they would collide with extra force, sending his pipe deeper into her snatch. Both of them writhed in pleasure when this happened. They had the timing perfectly synchronized, and whenever they collided their brains were flooded with pleasure. They wished they could have felt this forever, but even shinobi have their limits, and the two were no different. "You are amazing too, baby. Phew, you're about to make me come," the Uchiha said and stabilized herself with both hands placed on Naruto's abs. Her declaration only made Naruto try harder, and he went into overdrive. He slid back and forth through her core like a piston, reaching places that sent bolts down his lover's spine. He continued to pound upwards into her, feeling pressure build up inside of him. "Where do you want it?" I want it inside. Please." Their thrusts got into an odd tempo, but they still vigorously made love. They were no longer synchronized in their movements, but they compensated that with thrusts twice as strong. Their moans got louder and their cussing more frequent. Both were trying their hardest to send themselves and each other over the edge. "All right, I'm coming," Naruto said with one last thrust. He put his hands around the woman's thin waist and pushed her down towards him, trying as hard as he could to go as deep as possible. Mikoto's back arched, and her toes curled until the joints went white. Quote exclamation mark quote. They said together. Naruto's member exploded, sending thick ropes of semen into Mikoto's thirsty core. His flexed with each spurt, and Mikoto's mind-numbing orgasm caused her inner walls to tighten and try their best to milk the object inside of her. They sat shaking together until a short while after their orgasms had subsided. Their breathing was labored, and sweat covered every square inch of their skin. They held each other's gaze once again, and they both leaned in for another melting kiss. This one filled with less lust than those previous, but the same amount of passion. Their kiss broke, and the beautiful woman above Naruto collapsed onto his chest, her head landing right on his collarbone. She sighed contentedly as her body settled from the movement. Naruto, whose body was taut and still in an upward thrust, also relaxed. His legs slid against the cushions until they were fully outstretched, and this movement freed himself from the warm sleeve that was caressing him. Mikoto gave a mixture between a moan and whimper at this event, and she could feel streams of excess semen leak out of her and run down. She kept her head on his chest, hearing his loud heartbeat slowly settling down.